All right, so we're going to do chapter 15, the resurgence of empire in East Asia, and we're going to do heading one. Heading one is concerned with the restoration of centralized imperial rule in China. Okay. What the College Board has said that they would be most interested in and would could possibly test you on is the Tang and Song dynasties utilizing traditional methods of Confucianism and imperial bureaucracy to maintain and justify their rule. So this is actually kind of close to what you might think of China today. You see China as this huge country on our maps today. Classically, in world history, China has actually been smaller. It's been this eastern part. There are moments and some centuries of this big country, and then more centuries where it's not, where it's this area, especially this area kind of up around here. We are going to see over and over again different groups which are going to come in and kind of take over China, different parts, or different ethnicities which will rise up from different people who are living in China. Okay, it's important to note the Yellow River is here and very important. The Yangtze River is down here, also very important. These are major waterways. I'm about to tell you about the Grand Canal, which is incredibly impressive because it is going to be man-made, basically a man-made river linking these two rivers together. Okay. Um, so we're going to start with the Sui dynasty. So again, we are coming not even at the midpoint. We're past the midpoint of known Chinese history. So at this point, there have been regional kingdoms that have been kind of fighting with each other under the collapse of the Han dynasty. Yang Jian is going to be the one to consolidate power again to create that eastern half of China, or what is classically China in world history. And that dynasty is going to be best known for its massive building projects. Now, building projects are wonderful and impressive and can be helpful, but they need a lot of labor. And most people don't volunteer for that type of labor. So you either have to use military labor or you have to use conscripted labor. So conscripted means the government is forcing you, or a power is forcing you to do the work. And as I mentioned before, that Grand Canal I showed you was incredibly impressive. It's going to, there have been a long history of canals in China trying to take advantage of the Yellow or the Yangtze or the Xi River. And so this is going to be about 1,240 miles of connected canal with roads on either bank. It is going to be the way to move goods incredibly easily. And it's not going to be the 20th century until railroads, till we get things which have that much traffic back and forth on them. So here's Sui Yangdi, who's credited with being the thrusting force to make it happen. Small problem with making this wonderful thing, which is going to be helpful, is that, again, you have a lot of conscripted labor. And so people are usually upset at doing that, and that's going to be one of the downfalls of the Sui dynasty. The other thing will be the military failure in Korea, which also is going to prompt rebellion. We have a long history over Korea creating tributary relationships. More on that later. This is going to lead to the emperor being assassinated in 618. And this gives me a chance to kind of mention the idea of mandate of heaven, which is one of the ideas that basically the heavens or the spirits or the gods will anoint specific people to be in charge. And as long as that person has the mandate of heaven, then everyone should totally follow that person. If they lose the mandate of heaven, you should get rid of them and follow who has the mandate of heaven. And one way that you can tell if someone's lost it is if they have military failures. And so this Sui dynasty is gone. The Tang dynasty starts. And actually, we're going to focus on the second emperor, Tang Taizong, who is going to be an incredibly strong ruler. He's going to make the capital Chang'an, not the typical Beijing, which is a little bit more inland. Going to be known for law and order. He's going to have definitely collect taxes, but in general, prices are going to be low, which are going to be very popular amongst people. And what's interesting is that he's going to really borrow a lot from the Sui policies. He's just going to be more effective in implementing them. Some other things which are crucial, like I mentioned before, is that transportation and communication with extensive postal and courier services. That's huge and incredibly important to be able to move messages where you need to, and to be able to mail things to people. I know you're used to, up to this year, having a super effective postal service, and that is difficult to do and crucial for a well-run country. Another thing is that they're going to have he's going to have this we're going to have this innovation called the equal field system. One of the problems with civilization in general is how do you prevent the rich from winning all the time? And so what happens is the rich tend to get richer, so on and so forth. So what they're going to implement in the Tang Dynasty is going to be the equal field system. So a strong male is able to get a huge amount of land for his family, and then he dies. So what happens to that land? Well, they decide what you do is the family gets to keep 20% of it, but then the 80% of it is redistributed to other people. And so so the amount of land you get depends on your family size and the type of land. If you got great land, you might not get that much. If they give you, if it's poor land, they might give you more to give you a chance to survive. It's going to work well for a few hundred years, but by the 8th century, we're already going to have too much corruption, which, as you would imagine, this would be a place you would see that, and also the loss of land to Buddhist monasteries, which we'll cover later. One of the most important parts of the Tang Dynasty is the bureaucracy of merit. This idea that people get advantages not from their family or their background or money, but they're good at it. One thing that typically happens in countries that fail or civilizations that fail is you'll see a lot of bribery and nepotism. People related to the leader who are given way more power than they should be given and don't have the credentials to take care of. So how do you make sure the bureaucrats in charge know what they're doing? Well, you create an Imperial civil service exam. And what do you study? What does that test on? That tests on Confucian principles. And we'll talk more about Confucianism in a future video. So that way you get the smartest people in charge. And it's going to be an incredibly effective system. There will be some bribery. There will be some nepotism, where there's a will, there's a way for people to cheat. But the idea in general is going to last for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. It's not going to be really until the 20th century that we don't do this, and then communism will take over, and they have their own kind of version of this. But anyway, that's for later on. Another thing that's important to know about the Tang is how large they get. As you notice, they get as large as we might think of China today. So Manchuria, Korea, Vietnam, Tibet, all under the control of the Tang Dynasty. So this is them at one of their largest points. Now, to rule that amount of land, you can't necessarily control it directly. And so they're going to have a lot of tributary relationships. So what that means is basically China is going to say, look, we're in charge, and I'll let you rule this area, but you need to defer to me. You need to give me gifts. You need to defer whenever I need something from you. And so so if you've ever heard of paying tribute, that's what you're doing, is you're giving something to someone in power. This is one of the ways where China really reinforces the Middle Kingdom for how important they are to just Asia as a whole. This is also when we really see the explosion of the kowtow ritual. So you might have heard of kowtow before. To kowtow means to completely defer to somebody. It's not just like a bow. If you kowtow to somebody, it's something similar to this area over here, to this picture over here, where you see the person is just prostrating themselves, not fully, but they're totally at the mercy of whoever it is they're bowing to. And so, as you can see, this is one of the biggest that China has ever been. All of this area is going to be under the sway. The Tang Dynasty. Chang'an. Here's where the capital is. This is where you're used to it being, up here in Beijing. We'll talk about Hangzhou here in just a second. Later on, we'll be talking about Uyghurs, who originally are from this area and will be coming down. It's not here, but Manchuria is over there. And as we mentioned, here in Korea, we have the Shilla Kingdom, which has a tributary relationship with China. Okay, moving on. So things are going great for the Tang Dynasty. So what happens? What happens is that there is a point where you can win too much after too many generations. What tends to happen is generations after generations, they can rely on their, they can just totally rely on the on the work that's done from the dynasty in the past. And that's what happens here. Is we have this bureaucracy, and the emperor at the time becomes obsessed with music and his favorite concubine. Concubine just means sex slave. It's the easiest way to put it. So if you've heard of different leaders having wives and concubines, so the wives are kind of official, the concubines are off to the side and just have to do whatever the emperor wants. So as you can see, what happens to the Song Dynasty? They invent Netflix and chill. The guy says, hey, the emperor says, look, I'm going to spend time with music and my woman. You guys run this and just keep the money going. As you'd imagine, that's a red flag that you're about to lose the mandate of heaven. So in 755, we have An Lushan, so former military commander, and he actually captures Chang'an, but his rebellion is crushed by 763. This leads to the Tang Dynasty using Uyghur mercenaries to come down and help to suppress the rebellion. They look and see at the state that the Tang Dynasty is in, and they decide to sack or take things from the different cities. So this is going to lead to about 150 years of decline. As we're going to have rebellions, and we're going to have different groups. These regional kingdoms start to kind of pop up again. Huang Chou is one of the important rebels you should know about. He is going to be a very Robin Hood-like figure, raiding the rich for the poor. This eventually is going to lead to the Song Dynasty. So the Song Dynasty is also going to have a good run of like 300 years, and they're going to have a huge emphasis on administration, industry, education, and the arts. You may know, if you know anything about history, you're like, wait a second, strong dynasties always have a military component as well. And what's interesting about the Song Dynasty is they're able to be for 300 years. And don't get me wrong, it's not that they don't have a military, they have one. It's just not going to be an emphasis. Even though their first emperor, Song Taizhou, if I remember right, he is going to be he's going to be from the military, but he is going to be installed by the troops. He's going to get to be in charge, but his policies he's going to use are actually going to favor civil servants and be focused on meritocracy, not on giving favors to the people who are in the military. So what's going to happen is I need you to focus at first at the red line. The red line is what the Song Dynasty is going to be for a lot of its history. And then what's going to end up happening is we're going to learn about the Jurchens who are going to come in, and we're going to have a southern Song Dynasty here in a little bit. All right, so there's two primary weaknesses that are going to happen. Is that number one, this emphasis on bureaucracy is good in some ways, but bureaucracies are always expensive. The other thing that's a difficulty is that once a bureaucracy is installed, it's normally hard to get rid of it because part of the bureaucracy's job is to justify its existence. So we're going to have a couple of peasant rebellions in the 1100s, which will be put down, but will weaken them. And then there's going to be calls for reform, but not necessarily put into practice because, again, of the entrenchment of the bureaucracy. The other thing that's going to be a weakness is that is the emphasis on civil servants is going to mean that some of them will have key leadership positions in the military, which is difficult. You should have some form of military training if you're going to be in charge of a country like that. So and so that's something to keep in mind because eventually, especially if it's going to be a few hundred years, you're probably going to go to war at some point. And we're going to have a series of different nomadic attacks, like I mentioned before. The Jurchen are going to come in and conquer parts of the Song Dynasty, and they're going to have to move down to create the Southern Song. So the Southern Song is able to hold fast until they eventually fall to the Mongols, which will be in a future chapter. And that is heading number 1.